Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
You're listening to the Branding for Entertainers podcast, where we talk about your visual, verbal, and virtual brand and why it matters. This podcast helps entertainers grow and become someone that your clients and audience remember long after your gig is over. And now, here's your host, Billy Diamond.
Hello, Billy Diamond here. I hope everybody had a wonderful and enjoyable Thanksgiving, and we need to dive right into this episode today because my special guest, Tim Mannix, has a lot that he wants to share with you as it relates to overcoming fear and how he was able to triumph through that. So let's do this. We're going to dive right into this episode with Tim Mannix. Tell us, what kind of entertainer are you? What is it you do?
Well, boy, that's always the question. What do you do that and why?
I was going to say, maybe that should be the question. Why is it you do what you do? That should be a question, actually.
Thank you for using the term entertainer. It's used loosely sometimes. But I am an entertainer first. My stock and trade is magic. But first and foremost, I'm an entertainer. So I use a lot of humor and comedy in my work because it's just more fun. You know, it makes it a little more interesting, I think.
I think that's the biggest thing I always try to teach guys is find out who you are first, because that will dictate your market and what you love to do.
That is true. And I speak to a lot of guys. I've had the pleasure of lecturing. I got to lecture for the Society of Young Magicians, the Magic Castle, and a couple places. I'm not a big lecturer, but I've had some cool gigs. We hear this story too. What you used to like to do when you were a kid, when you're 50-something, late 40-something.
Right.
After you've been working and thinking, gosh, what did I used to do for fun, you know? And they go back to magic. And so, but a lot of them are thinking about eventually sort of maybe kind of performing again. And they're just afraid. And I always say the same thing to them. There's no way around it. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to be the best you can be. You're not going to be brilliant. Nobody starts out brilliant. You just go and do the very best you can, like the rest of life. Everybody's doing the best they can.
Sure.
Go and do the best you can. I remember when I was a kid and I'd hear magicians say, well, it's taken me years to develop this act or this particular routine or something. I'm like, what are they talking about? Now that I'm out in the trenches, I know exactly what they're talking about. It's only through hundreds of performances where you're like, oh, what did I do? Because the audience had a huge reaction. I don't even know what I did. Or I said something a different way and I got a huge laugh where it never did before.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, okay, I'm going to do that again if I remember what I did. So that's why through trial and error and countless performances, the key if you're brand new guys, do self-working things, do things where you can focus on the presentation. Here's the secret in the sauce. It's all in the presentation. The rest of it's technical. You know, it's skill. It's rehearsal. Practice is different than rehearsal. Rehearsal is rehearsing something you already know. Practice is getting to know something you're not fully acquainted with. So they're two different things. And all actors that are on the greatest stages in the world, rehearse. Even a play they've done hundreds of times. You know, it's only magicians that think, I got to order this thing from the magic store so I can get here on Friday because I got a show on Saturday. It's like,
that's true.
Nobody does that except for crazy people in our profession. It's like, no.
So can you tell us, were there any scary times or low times in your career, or perhaps when you felt like really vulnerable? I think those are neat things because
Sure.
I always feel this way, and let me preface it with this, that I always feel like some of those low times and some of those struggles that we deal with, especially as entertainers,
Right.
can be also some of our greatest successes.
Sure.
And I find that to be true. Just to reiterate a little bit of my background of 4 failed suicide attempts, you know,
Wow.
I really personalize it. I don't expect you to do that, but if you could share maybe just something personal, a career struggle or a personal struggle that you've dealt with, how you've overcome it, I think those are neat things because it lets people know that, you know what, at the end of the day, we are more than entertainers. We are real people.
Yeah.
And it is all possible to get through, and you can change your outlook of life.
Of course.
Is that something you'd be willing to share with listeners?
Sure. It's not something I chat about a lot. It's just not that interesting to me anyway. But I went through a particularly challenging time in my life. As life kind of unfolded, I wound up in Los Angeles and studied acting out here and thought I would also do my magic. And so I, not knowing anything, I mean, I was practically just a bumpkin from Oklahoma, and called around. They said, come to this place in Studio City, and I did a show. As it turned out, they just, for some reason, didn't like me. You know, I'd made friends with a little office girl, and she said, yeah, for some reason, the owner doesn't like you. And here's what got me. This is the spear through the heart moment.
Tim, was this an agency, or was it just an individual?
It was an agency in Los Angeles, California, an agency. But they said there was a magician. It was a lady magician from the Magic Castle there. And she said, quote unquote, she thought you were a crappy magician.
Did you think you sucked? Did you? I mean, we can all be better, but I mean, did you really suck?
Unless everybody in my entire life had lied to me, I didn't suck. I didn't think I sucked. I would never have shown up to that interview. I never would have called them. And I thought, I'm really second rate. Let me give this a whirl. I'd always gotten really great feedback, and I gotten paying jobs. So what did I know? Now, at the time, of course, that hit me like a thunderbolt. And I really thought, wow, I guess I just can't compete out here. This is the big time, and I ain't it. It really pulled the rug out from under me. Now, as a side note, I should tell you, I had about a thimble's full of self-esteem at the time. As it turned out, I put all my stuff, packed it away in a closet, didn't touch it for 14 years, couldn't bear to touch it.
No.
It was painful. I actually took that person's word as gospel, to use a phrase.
So somebody you never met.
Right.
Just somebody who told the agency, that guy sucks.
Well, this was a gal that worked for the agency as another performer. Guess who wanted all the work for the agency? She didn't want any competition.
So it was political.
So I didn't know that at the time, but I found that out later. And I should tell you, at the time, I was an I guess you'd call it diagnosed alcoholic and a party animal. That was part of the deal. So when you don't have any self-esteem, once somebody confirms your worst fear, you can, if you make a mistake like I did, take it as fact.
Are you saying that you did have a drinking problem?
I did.
Is that?
I didn't know I had a drinking problem. People who have drinking problems don't know they have drinking problems.
Right.
But yes, I did.
So that mixed with that insecurity of also feeling like, oh, well, maybe I am crap. Maybe I am not a good magician or a good entertainer.
Right.
Can you expand on that? And I don't want to press your buttons.
It's called the family disease of alcoholism. It's a family disease, and it's passed on from generation to generation. And it doesn't mean everybody becomes an alcoholic in your family, but somehow you're like becoming this carrier. I mean, I'm not here to do a special report on alcoholism, but in our family, it had been passed on for generations like it is. My sisters are not alcoholics, but, a couple of us are. So some do, some don't. Sometimes it skips an entire generation, but somehow the seed of it goes on. And so anyway, I was just one of those folks that wound up not being able to handle using alcohol to manage my emotional state. And so you sort of pass this invisible line. There's no going back. And that's kind of what happened to me. It was about 5 years later that I did get clued into the fact that I was an alcoholic and I needed help. And thank God I got help, and it changed my life. So I'm very grateful for that.
Was that a self-evaluation, or was that somebody telling you?
Yeah, it is. Because if you go and get help in the organization I get help with, you are the only one that it is a self-diagnosed disease. Gotcha. Nobody tells you are an alcoholic. They can. Sure. But until you fully admit yourself that, wow, I got a problem, you don't have a problem. Right. So that's what happened to me. And so anyway, I haven't had a drink in 31 years.
Wow,
So,
good for you, man.
but
Good for you.
yeah, it was brilliant. It was the best thing I'd ever done at that point in my life,
Wow.
and it's life-changing stuff. So I highly recommend it. But
And by the way, for those that are listening, I mean, I've always been very forthcoming with my story, and I think it's great, Tim. I really appreciate you sharing
of course,
from your heart. And it's not a thing of judgment. Like, you know what?
no,
We're all at different places. So anybody listening to this, maybe you're not ready for that, and maybe you're dealing with all these things, and that's okay too.
yeah,
And when I say it's okay, you have to be ready. And this is a whole different thing of off topic and really genuine, off of the Branding for Entertainers podcast, because I really think it's important that you also see the other side to a life, not just the business of entertainment. It's, you know what, we
right.
all deal with these things.
I think there's a lot of entertainers that have problems with substance, as we call it, and
Yeah.
I have heard many a birthday mom tell me that the clown or the magician showed up drunk, which blows my mind. I'm like, what?
That's like going to the office and doing your job drunk, right? I mean,
It is.
right? It's no different.
And so I'm sure we
Wow.
could get on a huge bunny trail about that. But there's folks in all areas of life that just simply don't have the skill set to kind of manage where they are. By the way, I want to tell you this thing, super important. In the course of my sobriety, I asked for help. I had a mentor, and I also had professional help, which is funny, quote unquote. You need professional help. But I went to a therapist, and she's the lady, because this is part of my magic story. She was a wonderful therapist. But by the way, this was 9 years into my sobriety. So I didn't just put down the bottle and pick up the cups and balls. I had a hard time figuring out what my joy was, what my passion was. And so
all your stuff was packed away at this point, right?
it was, and had been packed away for 14 years.
Wow.
She asked me in one session one time, she said, simple question, what did you used to do as a kid that you liked? And I told her about magic. I told her everything, the books, going to the magic store. I told her about a utility shed my father bought me that I built that became my magic shed that I could lock my little tricks in, and the love and joy that I felt about magic. And when I quit talking, there was a moment of silence, and she looked at me and said, wow, you got to go back and do that. And I said, no, I mean, that's just something I did. I pushed back. That's just something, I haven't done that in 14 years. It's not something I'm going to do anymore. And she said, no, you really have got to go back and do that. And I said, why? And she said, because your face lights up when you talk about it.
Wow.
So every week, she'd ask me, have you taken any action on doing your magic? And I'm like, oh my God, no, I haven't. Well, why don't you make some phone calls? And it's like, oh my God. She was on me week after week. It got to the point where I'm like, I have got to get this woman off my back. So I open up the phone book, the Yellow Pages. Yes, kids, the Yellow Pages, it's a book that we used to use.
Back how we used to market.
Right.
Once upon a time.
So I literally went back to that same starting place of calling a company, rent a clown, rent a magician, rent a pony, kind of in the phone book. And I called the first one I can find, called the Devroe Agency in Burbank. And this old codger answered the phone, Bill Devroe, Devroe Agency. And I gave the lamest pitch. I was mortified. I was terrified. I stumbled and stammered. I used to do this thing, and I just was kind of wondering maybe if you had work or you needed magicians. And he interrupted me and said, we got pages and pages of magicians. I don't need any more magicians. Okay. I was kind of happy. I was going to hang up. I could report back to her. Took action. Nothing happened. Leave me alone.
I tried.
I tried. It failed. Get off me. So leave me alone. Anyway, he said, well, wait a minute. Before you go, why don't you give me your name and number? It's like, oh, I gave my name and number. So that was the end of that.
So wait a second. So he stopped you. He's like, I got pages of magicians,
yeah,
but listen, kid.
By the way, I used that against him a couple of years later. But anyway, 3 weeks later, the phone rings because I go back to her and report to her. I took action. Nothing happened. Phone rings. Bill Devroe Agency. Got a gig for you. It's like, oh, I was mortified. I couldn't tell him I hadn't touched my stuff. Now, I'd been a demonstrator in a magic shop for years and had done probably hundreds of shows as a kid and a young adult. And, oh, yeah, but before he hung up, he said, you have a wizard's costume, don't you?
So he never auditioned you anything. He just like, hey, I got a gig.
Well, no. Gotta get a wizard's costume. Well, yeah, all the guys are wearing that.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, okay. I knew a costumer, and I called him up. They got me literally from Fantasia, that Mickey Mouse costume with the big blue arms and the big pillar pointed hat. And it was made for a 6'2" guy, and I'm 5'8", but I showed up. It was a birthday party for a 6-year-old kid in Van Nuys. And I loaded up and I suited up and I showed up and I told them I usually don't wear my hat because I couldn't balance the thing.
It was so big, huh?
I don't wear my hat during the show, And I swear to God, I felt like I was a 6-year-old. I was scared, shaking like a leaf. And I just prayed and I said, you know what? I'm gonna do the best I can. That's all. When I get scared now, I'm just gonna do the best I can. Let my love of people, my love of magic, my love of craft show up. And I did the show, and I worked for Bill Devroe for about 2 years, and almost just shy of 2 years, I got a park show in Burbank. So he shows up, never seen my act. I was just a warm body he sent out. So I set up and I did the show. He left in the middle of it, but he told me before he left, he said, I always get good reports on you. And I said, you do? I mean, wow. I was just glad that nobody asked for their money back, So he had bumped up his commission unbeknownst to me, and we were making the same amount,
Wait, what? He was getting 50% of your income?
Exactly. And I asked him he would make 75 and I would make 75. It was $150 he was charging in those days.
It's a nice commission.
And so one of my clients said, "Oh, I already paid my $75 deposit." And I'm like, "You did you?" So I called old Bill up and said, "Hey, what vendor do you have that you pay 50% commission?" And shut him up. I said, "That's ridiculous.
Wow.
You got to raise the price of the show. I'm not doing
50%.
Yeah, he was Bill Devroe. Anyway, so. He, God rest his soul.
And by the way, I'm assuming Bill Devroe, the agency, no longer exists.
I think Bill's booking the Angels now. I don't know. But anyway, he's, God love him. He took a chance on me. But it also told me how much he cared about his clients. Oh, that's right. Before he hung up the very first day, he gives me that gig and he says, here it is. Boom, boom, boom. Get the wizard's costume. And by the way, one more thing. I said, yeah. If you fall on your ass, you're on your own. Click. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, Bill Devroe. Apparently I didn't. So that was, can you imagine showing, never saw my act, never asked me a question. And he called one day and had a gig for me. And I said, well, I've already got a booking. I started studying marketing and I had my own website. And he was like, big shot, eh? And I was like, well, I'm just trying to get other shows. So the bookings tapered off really quick. It was fine, but I owe him an enormous bit of gratitude for taking me on, sight unseen. And I needed to go out and do shows just to get my performance legs back because I just had no confidence. So that's my story. But I always regretted allowing what somebody said to rob me of my dream. I mean, that was 14 years of really performing or interact, I don't know, something that I missed.
Wow.
And I try and teach that to kids. Don't let anybody steal your dream. They're out there, And if they're not working on their dream, they like to steal yours or at least tell you can't have it.
Boy, that is so true for sure. Wow. Yeah, them dream stealers, they're coming for you. So look out, guard yourself. Tim, what a fantastic story. You dove into a lot more than I even imagined you would, and I am just so grateful. I just know that a lot of entertainers are really dealing and struggling to just kind of cope with life, and I know that your story is going to impact some people and have some relatability on many different levels. You shared so much, and it wasn't just about addictions and things like that, but your struggles, and they were real, and I think they're real for a lot of other people too. So
Yeah.
thank you, and we're going to be back with Tim Mannix here in just a moment. Stay tuned, because you're not going to want to miss what Tim has to say next. Hey, let's face it, we're living in uncertain times right now. 2020 has been a crazy year, to say the least. With COVID, social distancing, and a lack of the ability to do live shows like we used to, is it any surprise that some of us might be suffering from depression, or even worse, we just want to give up altogether? Well, I can tell you, my friend, I certainly know what that feels like, and it's not fun, but you can get through it. And here's how I suggest it. I want to encourage you to talk to someone. You're important, and so is your mental health. Talkspace is there when you need them. Talkspace makes therapy available and affordable for everyone. With Talkspace, you can send a therapist text messages, audio messages, as well as picture and video messages in private. And the best part, right from the comfort of where you're at right now. It's a great way to work through day-to-day challenges, to find the right tools to help you get right back on track and where you need to be. So, if you need a little extra help in your life, don't be afraid. It's okay to ask. Go to Talkspace.com and get matched up with a counselor today. Your results can be life-changing. And now, let's get back to our show. So, what is amazing about your story is that the same lady from the Magic Castle that told you that all those years ago that you were basically a shit magician, and now you are performing the Magic Castle. And they don't just let anybody in.
Right.
So what a big round of applause, a standing ovation to you, just because of all those things. You persevered. All those things were lined up as far as like your therapist to encourage you to go back into performing and doing what you love. Like, she encouraged you to get back into it.
Yeah. I still have moments. I've been at the Magic Castle since 2014, and it'll do a mind game on me where I'm like, oh no. And it's like, wait a minute. You've been coming here a while. What are you thinking? My philosophy about magic is, and it's not even that deep, is something you already know. Magic is a performance art, and it's unlike others in that, some others, but it's a visual performance art, and it's meant to be shared. You can do it for yourself in the mirror at home, but why would you? I mean, it's meant to be shared with the world. And I know it's scary to go out and sometimes get some negative feedback. On some people are not particularly good audience members. I remember my mom. I finally learned to quit going to my mom. I'd practice on some. I'd go show my mom, and she'd say, and she's super smart, always was, came from the head, not the heart, and she'd say, well, keep practicing, She could not give it to me to say, oh, that's wonderful. That's a cool trick. She couldn't do it. So, I don't know. It's a funny art, but I really think that it needs to be shared. There's one story I wanted to relate to you because it meant so much to me. I happen to like Matt King very much because he's just another good all-around entertainer, And so those are kind of the folks that I really am drawn to, Jeff Hobson and folks like that. Anyway, I'm in between shows, and I happen to notice, oh, there's Matt King. You see people, they're there having lunch with friends or brunch or whatever. I never think for an instant that he would come to my show, So, but I don't think much of it. And then all of a sudden, they introduced me for the second or the third show or whatever it is. Here he is. I burst through the curtains, and sitting third row up, right smack dab in the middle, is Matt King. And flanked on the left and right of him is Tina Leonard and Mike Caveney. And for a minute, my heart, I don't know if it jumps or sinks. It did something. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh no. I mean, I got scared again, And I think because I've talked to myself, and I understand I can be afraid, but I am here to entertain people. My prime directive is not to entertain magicians. It's an impossible task.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's no guarantee. So just do the best you can, Tim. Do the show. I do the show. Audience has a good time. I have a good time. And sure enough, a couple folks stay behind. Well, it's those three: Matt King, Tina Leonard, and Mike Caveney. And they could not have been nicer. They took the time to say thank you, and you were great, and we enjoyed the show, and just chatted. But it was a pivotal moment in my little magic career, because I thought, isn't that extraordinary that three awesome performers took the time to stay and say, we really appreciated what you did.
Wow.
And so much so that we wanted to tell you in person. And then off they went. And they happened to tell the entertainment director on the way out, you need to get more guys like that.
Wow.
But that story would never have occurred if I didn't show up. If I didn't show up to the audition. If I didn't show up and go, I may not be good enough, but I'm going to try anyway. And then go, yeah, we'd like to have you here. And we'd like to continue having you here.
Tim, there's some other factor to that, though, and that's the fact that, wow, you had three really genuine people. Those are real, genuine, good-hearted people in our industry.
Yeah.
That, you know what, we can all emulate and say the same thing.
Yeah.
And you know what? I bet that did so much, not for your ego, but for your spirit.
Yeah.
It was for your spirit.
Oh, it was great.
I think on a higher plane that those are things that were orchestrated. Those are things that meant to be that you needed to hear, and they couldn't have come from better people in our industry. Oh, my gosh, man.
And it left me with a really great story to tell, that
it is a great story.
Can cherish the rest of my life. And so...
Because the other side of that is you could have had shitty assholes on the other side of that.
Well, yeah.
Like, whatever.
Right.
But you had actually great industry people.
Yeah.
And they are really good people. I think that was orchestrated, that you needed to hear those things. And you know what? I think those are things that we can pass those same things on.
Yeah. The more I've lived out of my comfort zone, the more scary it's been, but the better the payoff. And if you're not doing anything out of your comfort zone, you got to start. I mean, it's called living. You can be safe, but it's not much of a life.
But you know what? The other part of that is I understand this because back with my depression and suicidality and all that, it's really easy to live out of fear.
Big time.
And you know what, man? Fear will hold you back.
It's true.
Fear will hold you back. And if you're serious, you know what? It doesn't matter. You at least start. Just start.
Yeah, amen.
Just take the step.
It's true.
And if you take the step, I mean, that's whether that's as an entertainer or personally, it's just take the step.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you're going to be great right from the start. It just means that you're going to take the step.
Be willing to be mediocre.
And be willing to, you know what? Be willing to be vulnerable, I think.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. No audience comes in, I really want to see something substandard tonight.
Right.
So
Right.
The audience is on your side. They want you to win. They want you to be good. They want to work with you.
They want you to,
They're not there throwing daggers. And we sort of get caught up sometimes in the wrong mindset, in the wrong thinking. And they want you to win, That's why you got to keep them on your side. They want to laugh and have a good time. You've already won them before you've started, in some sense.
Oh, my gosh. That is really, really good advice, actually. And you know what? That rings even more true when we're talking about virtual shows and things like that, where the audience really is on your side, especially right now. So, wow, really, really good advice, Tim. Thank you again so much for being on the podcast. We have to wrap this up, and I am so sorry, but would you do me a favor? Would you come back on the episode again this week? Because I know you have just so much that you can offer aside from your personal story and just being out there in the trenches. So when we talk again, I have some things in mind that I know that you can really offer some help to some guys, and I'd really appreciate that. So will you come back again?
Sure.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. That would be fantastic. I look forward to catching up with you. And listeners, I look forward to catching up with you too. Thanks again for listening to the Branding for Entertainers podcast. And I will talk to you along with my guest, Tim Mannix, in a few days.